The sun burned low over Bitter Hollow, spilling molten gold across the jagged peaks and endless dust. The train wailed once, long and hollow, before screeching to a halt like a wounded beast. Doors clattered open, heat shimmered above the rusted tracks. From the last car, she stepped down. A lone figure, skin the color of polished mahogany against the harshness of the West. Eliza Munro held her back straight, chin lifted, heart hammering. A well-worn carpetbag in one hand, her only worldly belongings. The other hand tightened around the folded letter she had read 100 times on the journey west. Its edges soft as silk now. The station was silent. No welcoming party. No outstretched hand. Just eyes, narrowed, suspicious, lingering too long. A man spat in the dust, eyes locked on her. Two women whispered behind gloved fingers. A boy pointed. Eliza walked forward. Dust rose around her boots. Her dress, simple but clean, trailed faintly behind like a shadow. The town stood before her. Weathered storefronts, faded signs, warped window panes reflecting the burning sky. She found him. Sheriff Callahan. Badge tilted slightly, sweat stains under his collar, lips curled in permanent disdain. "You Eliza Munro?" he asked, voice dry as the dust. "I am." He took the paper from her hand, squinted at the ink, then smirked. "Mail order. Bride, huh? Says here you're contracted to marry one Mr. Gabriel Thorne." The name hung heavy in the air. Conversation stopped. A poker chip froze mid-air in the saloon doorway across the street. Eliza nodded, voice calm but tight. "I've come as agreed." The sheriff shook his head slowly. "No, ma'am. You've come under false pretense. This town don't recognize. This here contract. Ain't nobody gonna take you in, not for what you're worth." A hush fell. Eliza's fingers clenched. "I paid my passage. My contract is valid. Your own seal is on it." Callahan chuckled darkly. "Ain't the seal I question. It's the merchandise." The word cracked across the platform like a gunshot. Someone laughed, high, cruel, sharp. Eliza did not move, did not blink, only stared. Clara Finch, widow of the wealthiest merchant, stepped forward, silk parasol spinning lazily in her hand. "You're out of your depth, dear. Did you really believe someone of standing would want you? A mail-order bride should know her place, and her price." Murmurs rippled. Price. Too high. Too proud. Eliza's shoulders squared. "I don't belong to anyone, least of all to your small minds." The sheriff stepped forward. "Best be on your way. Next train leaves at dusk." The crowd began to disperse. Boots shuffled, doors slammed. A tumbleweed skittered across the street. Alone, Eliza stood beneath. The blistering sun, the weight of rejection pressing on her chest but not breaking it. Her eyes scanned the street. No help, no kindness. Hoofbeats, slow, heavy, rhythmic as a heartbeat. From the far end of town, a rider emerged. Dust curling around the black stallion's legs like smoke. The figure in the saddle wore a long black coat, wide-brimmed hat shadowing his face, broad-shouldered, upright, calm. A rifle slung over his back. His presence split the heat like a blade. The townspeople froze. Whispers spread like wildfire. Gabriel Thorne. Eliza didn't flinch. As the rider approached, the horse stopped inches from her. Thorne dismounted without a word. His boots sank slightly into the hot dust. The sheriff cleared his throat nervously. "Gabriel, now hold on." Thorne ignored him. His gloved hand lifted Eliza's carpetbag. The leather creaked softly, then finally his voice, low, cold, unwavering. "You'll ride with me." Eliza blinked. "What?" The sheriff stepped forward, blustering. "Gabriel, this woman..." Thorne stared at him. The sheriff stopped speaking. "I sent for her." Thorne continued. his eyes, pale and merciless, locked on Eliza. "She's mine." The words hung in the heat like judgment. Eliza's throat tightened. Anger, confusion, relief warred inside. Her. "I don't belong to—" "I know," Thorne said, softer now. "But you're coming." The townsfolk watched in stunned silence as Gabriel Thorne helped Eliza onto the horse. Her skirt whispered against the saddle. He mounted behind. Her. They turned away from Bitter Hollow. The hoofbeats faded into the open land. The sun bled into the mountains, and the whispers lingered like ghosts. Eliza Monroe's gone with the Black Baron. The Butcher of Del Rio rides again. In the distance, the sky darkened. The wind carried the dust of Bitter Hollow back across the empty tracks. The train remained, waiting for a passenger who would never return. The land swallowed them whole. The town had vanished behind a wall of dust as Gabriel Thorne's stallion pressed forward, hooves thudding against the parched earth. The landscape stretched wide and empty. Jagged mountains clawed at the horizon. Skeletal trees twisted like warning fingers. The wind howled low and mournful. Eliza gripped the saddle horn tightly. Each mile widened the distance from humiliation, but deepened the mystery. She could feel his presence behind her, silent, still, unshakable. Not a word since they left, not a glance. Only the slow, relentless rhythm of travel. The sun dipped as they crested a ridge. Below lay the Thorne Ranch. It was not what she expected. No polished fences or flowering gardens, instead, a sprawling, battered kingdom. Weathered outbuildings stood like forgotten sentinels. The main house loomed, blackened wood and cracked windows staring like hollow eyes. Cattle grazed the barren fields under the watch of armed wranglers. Smoke drifted lazily from a distant chimney. The horse halted. Gabriel dismounted and offered her a hand, calloused, scarred. She hesitated, then took it. Inside, the house breathed of cold stone and faded grandeur. Dust coated everything, heavy curtains, dented oil lamps, the fireplace scarred from years of heat. Portraits of strangers stared down in silence from crooked frames. "You can have the upstairs bedroom." His voice cut through the silence like a blade. "Food's in the kitchen, water pumps out back." He turned to go. "Wait." Eliza stepped forward. Her voice cracked but held steady. "Why?" He paused, but did not look back. "Why me? Why bring me here?" Gabriel stared into the darkness of the hallway. A long breath escaped him, almost a growl. "Because I keep my word." Then he was gone. Eliza stood alone in the gloom. The wind battered the walls as if demanding entry. She climbed the stairs slowly, trailing her fingers along the cracked banister. The bedroom was plain. A worn bed, a single candle stub, a cracked mirror clouded with age. She set down her carpet bag. Her reflection stared back, faint and uncertain. The next morning brought no answers, only work. The ranch operated like a machine of necessity. Men moved in grim silence. Cattle were herded through broken gates. Fence posts were reset. Gabriel worked among them, sleeves rolled, face hard. His black coat discarded, revealing lean muscle and the dark ink of an old military tattoo on his forearm. Eliza cooked, cleaned, fetched water under the glare of unspoken judgments. The men neither spoke nor offered kindness. They watched. Always watched. On the third day, the silence broke. A lone rider appeared at the edge of the property, motionless, observing, as still as the rocks around him. The sun glinted off the barrel of a rifle resting across his lap. The stranger wore a wide-brimmed hat pulled low and a dark duster stained by travel. His skin was dark, weathered by sun and wind. Eliza froze mid-step with the laundry basket in her arms. The man's eyes, cold and sharp as flint, met hers across the distance. A silent message passed. A warning or a promise. She could not tell. The rider tipped his hat once and vanished into the heat shimmer. That evening, over a meager meal, she tried again. Who was that man? Gabriel did not look up from his tin plate. Trouble. The word hung heavy in the dim candlelight. You've enemies. His fork scraped against the metal. Everyone has enemies. Eliza leaned back, watching him. They say things in town about you. A flash of something crossed his eyes. Pain, regret, fury, too fast to name. I was a gunman once, Gabriel admitted, voice raw. They called me the Butcher of Del Rio. I put that life behind me. Then why did you bring me here? His hands tightened into fists on the table. Because I thought it was time to build something. Someone to stand beside, not behind. The confessions slipped out like a wound reopening. Eliza said nothing, only stared into the flickering candle. Outside, coyotes howled at the rising moon. Days passed, weeks. The land softened her, hardened her, shaped her into part of its brutal rhythm. She learned the creak of the barn door, the weight of the water bucket, the feel of wind-blown grit. Against her cheeks, the men spoke grudgingly of her endurance. One by one, their suspicion thinned into wary respect. Then came the morning when the first fence post was burned. Eliza stood with Gabriel at dawn, staring at the charred ruin. Smoke twisted skyward like a black snake. Bootprints, too many to count, trailed into the hills. The Rains gang, Gabriel said, hatred sharp as a drawn knife. They want the land. They'll come again. Eliza stared at the scorched wood, heart racing, fists clenched at her sides. I'm not leaving. Gabriel's voice was cold steel. Good. They'll have to burn the whole damn place down to take it. The wind answered, whispering through the dying grass. Far off, a distant figure on horseback watched from a ridge. Silent. Waiting. The morning heat pressed hard against Bitter Hollow. Dust spiraled lazy and cruel in the dead air as Eliza stood at the corral fence, watching the cattle shift nervously. They smelled the danger before the people did. The ground itself seemed tense. Hoofbeats echoed faint but steady from the far ridgeline. Eliza's eyes narrowed. Riders. More than 5. They moved like wolves, spreading wide, circling. Her hand instinctively touched the pistol Gabriel had insisted she carry, heavy and foreign on her hip. The men at the ranch dropped tools and gathered at the fence. Faces grim, voices low, names whispered like curses. The Rains gang. No law, no mercy. They didn't rob. They erased. Amos Rains led them. A bear of a man with greasy black hair and the permanent sneer of a man who had never been told no and lived to punish those who tried. A jagged scar split his upper lip. His hat was pulled low, but his eyes gleamed under the brim with hunger. Amos reined in. Dust settled at his boots. His men fanned out behind him, all armed, their horses restless. Gabriel Thorne, Amos called, voice thick as swamp water. I heard you brought yourself a new queen. The ranch hands stiffened. Eliza stepped forward slowly, gaze level. Gabriel appeared at her side without a sound, black coat flapping faintly in the dry wind. His hand rested near his holster. You're trespassing, Gabriel said flatly. Amos grinned wide, rotten teeth catching the sun. I'm here to give friendly advice. Sell me the land, pack your pretty mail-order toy and leave. Eliza bristled, but Gabriel's voice stayed cold and calm. You want the land? Come and take it. Amos laughed long and cruel. We will. The gang wheeled their horses and rode off, trailing threats behind them. Dust swallowed their shapes. The ranch hands began repairing fence lines with silent urgency. Eliza stared long after the riders vanished, pulse hammering in her ears. Later that afternoon, Gabriel stood in the barn doorway watching her struggle with a heavy feed sack. He walked over, took the weight with a single motion. "I won't hide," she said before he could speak. "I didn't ask you to." She nodded once, the understanding sharp between them. The days dragged into nights thick with tension. They posted guards. Gabriel barely slept. Neither did Eliza. The gang circled like vultures, burning water barrels, scattering cattle, killing dogs. The sheriff refused to intervene, claiming no proof. His visits became frequent, each time lingering near Eliza a little too long, staring a little too hard. Gabriel noticed. His knuckles whitened around his whiskey glass. At sundown, a stranger walked through the front gate. Silent, tall, his lean frame wrapped in a long travel-stained coat. Wide-brimmed hat hiding his features. Only his dark, weathered skin caught the failing light. The men raised rifles. Gabriel waved them down. The man stopped 10 paces from Gabriel. Crow Daniels. Gabriel stared hard. "I thought you were dead." Crow smiled faintly, barely more than a tightening of the eyes. "Not yet." Eliza stepped closer. Crow turned his gaze to her, studying, weighing, calculating. He tipped his hat. "Heard you've got a problem," Crow said. Gabriel nodded once. "Rains." Crow's smile sharpened. "I've dealt with worse." Eliza watched the silent exchange. Two men with bloody pasts, bound by grudging trust. Later that night, as they sat around the cook fire, Crow cleaned his knife slowly. "You know they'll come soon," he murmured. Gabriel nodded. "I know. I'll stand with you." Gabriel looked across the flames at Eliza. "She stays out of it." Crow chuckled dryly. "You don't know her yet." The following morning, Eliza stood before Gabriel in the barn, hands firm at her sides. "Teach me." Gabriel frowned. "No. You brought me here. You said I was to stand beside you, not behind. Then let me stand." The silence dragged long. Dust shifted along the floorboards. Finally, Gabriel unbuckled his own pistol belt and handed it over. "Show me what you've got." The lessons were brutal. The first day she blistered her hand and barely hit the wide side of the barn. The second, she stood with shaking arms, sweat dripping into her eyes. By the fourth, she was faster than any of the men watching from the shadows. The sound of lead cracking through bottles became part of the rhythm of the ranch. Crow observed from a distance, arms crossed. "She's got iron in her spine." The next dusk, a flare lit the sky to the east. Fire. Gabriel cursed under his breath. They mounted up and rode hard. By the time they reached the outlying barn, it was an inferno. The cattle scattered wild-eyed through broken fences. The ranch hands tried to douse the flames with wet burlap, coughing in the smoke. Gabriel dismounted straight into the chaos, barking orders. Crow darted through the heat, dragging a trapped steer free. Eliza spotted a small figure crawling through the smoke, a child, barely older than 10, left behind in the panic. Without thinking, she sprinted through the burning timbers, skirt catching embers. Arms shielded her face. She scooped the child into her arms and staggered back, hacking, tears streaming from the smoke. Gabriel grabbed her at the last second, pulling her clear as the roof collapsed behind them in a screaming wall of sparks. The child sobbed into Eliza's arms. The men stood in stunned silence. Crow smiled grimly and nodded once. The ranch had survived. Barely. But the war had begun. Night fell heavy and violent across the plains. Smoke still clawed at the darkening sky above the ruined barn. The distant lowing of scattered cattle was the only sound. The men worked in grim silence, hauling smoldering debris away with blistered hands. The child Eliza had saved sat huddled by the cook fire, wrapped in a blanket, eyes wide and hollow. Gabriel stood apart from them all, a lone silhouette against the flicker of flames. His coat hung open, dust and sweat streaking his arms. The muscles in his jaw tightened as he watched Eliza approach. "They sent a message," she said. Gabriel's pale eyes locked with hers. I read it loud and clear. Before dawn, Crow returned from tracking the gang. His voice was low and sharp as a knife across whetstone. "They're camped in Dry Creek Canyon. 30 men, maybe more. They're waiting for you to break." Gabriel only nodded. The others gathered around the fire, waiting for a plan that would not come. No one spoke of surrender. On the second night, the wind shifted. A single gunshot cracked the silence. A ranch hand fell, lifeless before he hit the ground. The siege had begun. The first wave came before sunrise. Outlaws surged from the darkness like shadows with teeth. Fences splintered, horses screamed and bolted, bullets punched through wood and flesh. Gabriel was already moving, barking orders, steady hands working the lever of his Winchester. The rifle bucked with each shot. Men fell. Others ducked behind broken wagons and hay bales. Eliza crouched behind the water trough. Breath. Ragged revolver heavy in her grasp. Crow slid beside her, knife in one hand, pistol in the other. "Stay low, keep calm, aim for center mass." The words barely registered. A masked rider charged the main gate. Eliza stood, heart slamming against her ribs, and fired. The shot snapped clean through his chest. The outlaw tumbled backward into the dirt, lifeless. Her hands shook. Crow gave a quick approving nod before darting off into the smoke and gunfire. The battle turned savage. The Rains gang set fire to the stables. Horses kicked wildly as flames tore upward. A ranch hand stumbled out, ablaze, screaming into the void before collapsing. Gabriel stormed through the inferno, dragging 2 men free before returning to the fight. His duster caught an ember. He slapped it out without breaking stride. Through the chaos, Eliza spotted Amos Rains atop his black horse, calmly watching from the ridge. He was untouched by the violence, the cruel architect savoring his masterpiece. His gang swarmed like locusts, relentless. Eliza sprinted to the main house, kicked open the gun locker, and hauled out the heavy Henry rifle Gabriel had stashed for last resort. Smoke burned her eyes, but her hands worked steady. Outside, Gabriel stood alone against 6 riders charging straight at him. The first 2 fell clean from their saddles under his withering fire. The third barely managed to raise a pistol before Gabriel put him down. The fourth slammed into Gabriel's side, knocking the gun away. They crashed into the dirt, fists and boots flying. Gabriel fought like an animal cornered, teeth clenched, landing brutal blows. The outlaw gasped as Gabriel's knuckles broke bone. From the porch, Eliza fired. The rider behind Gabriel toppled, backward, dead before he hit the ground. Gabriel shoved the last attacker away and staggered to his feet, bloodied and breathing hard. He met Eliza's gaze for a split second. No words passed between them. The gang retreated temporarily, regrouping. Beyond the smoking fences, the ranch was battered but still standing. The wounded moaned softly in the grass. Cattle wandered through the wreckage, dumb and dazed. Crow appeared, knife dripping red. "They'll hit harder next time." Gabriel nodded, wiping blood from his face. "Then we hit back first." At sunset, Eliza walked the perimeter alone. The sky burned with streaks of crimson and gold, as if the land itself bled. The distant outline of Amos Rains still lingered on the horizon, unmoved. Eliza stared at the figure, her resolve hardening with every breath. Gabriel came up beside her. Silent. "We can't hold forever," she whispered. "We hold as long as it takes." The wind carried the faint sound of hooves returning to the canyon. The earth was not done swallowing blood yet. The next attack would come at dawn. They would be ready. The town of Bitter Hollow held its breath. The sun had barely risen when the sound of iron-shod hooves broke the morning calm. Gabriel Thorne rode into town alone, coat torn, blood stiffening the fabric at the seams. Dust coated him like a burial shroud. His face was unreadable as he dismounted in front of the courthouse. Every door cracked open. Every curtain shifted. The word spread fast. Thorne's boots echoed hollow on the splintered wood steps. Sheriff Callahan waited at the door, smug under the tilt of his polished star. He wore his Sunday best for the occasion. "You're under arrest for murder and unlawful discharge of firearms, Gabriel," Callahan said smoothly. "Hand over your weapons." Gabriel's pale eyes held no surprise. He unbuckled his gun belt slowly, letting it fall to the dirt. Callahan picked it up, running a finger along the worn leather. "Now let's give Bitter Hollow the hanging it's been owed for a long time." The cell door clanged shut behind Gabriel. Eliza arrived breathless, Crow a shadow at her side. Callahan stepped forward, blocking their path. "No visitors." Eliza's eyes narrowed. "I'm not leaving." Callahan laughed and leaned close. "What's a fancy piece like you sticking around for? Thought you'd run back east by now." Crow stiffened, fingers twitching toward the knife at his belt. Eliza put a calming hand on his arm. "We'll see you at the trial," she said, voice cold as winter. The trial came at high noon, the courthouse filled with townsfolk, faces twisted by curiosity and venom. Clara Finch sat primly in the front, row, parasol folded neatly on her lap, mouth set in satisfaction. Callahan paced the floor, weaving his story like a practiced vulture. This man, this killer, this so-called rancher brought chaos to our town, bloodshed, death, destruction, and for what? To protect a stranger he never intended to marry. A mail-order fraud. Bitter Hollow has suffered enough. Justice demands his neck. The crowd murmured. Eliza stood slowly from the back. Her boots clicked against the warped floorboards as she walked to the front. All eyes followed. She stepped onto the stand without hesitation. "Name?" the judge asked. "Eliza Monroe," Callahan sneered. "You shouldn't be here." Eliza ignored him. "I have evidence," she said. "I have the original contract for my travel signed by Gabriel Thorne, and I have land deeds, ones Sheriff Callahan tried to forge and claim after driving farmers off their land." A ripple of shock spread through the room. Callahan's face reddened. "Lies!" he barked. Eliza reached into her bag and held up the folded papers, stained with dust and sweat but intact. She handed them to the judge. Crow stepped forward from the shadows. "Found in the sheriff's private safe. Took some doing." The judge frowned as he read. Whispers turned to gasps. Callahan's hand moved toward his revolver. The motion was desperate, wild. Crow was faster. Steel flashed. The knife sank deep into the sheriff's shoulder, spinning him backward into the wall. Callahan collapsed, groaning in agony. The courtroom erupted. Clara Finch shrieked and fainted dead away. Judge banged his gavel furiously. "Order! Order!" Gabriel watched from the prisoner's dock, jaw clenched tight. The chains around his wrists rattled softly. The judge stood. "Gabriel Thorne, charges dismissed. Sheriff Callahan, you are hereby stripped of duty pending further investigation." Crow retrieved his blade with a cold efficiency, wiping it clean against Callahan's coat. Eliza walked to Gabriel as the men unlocked his cuffs. Their eyes met. She reached out and took his bruised hand in hers without hesitation. The crowd parted wordlessly as they walked out together under the burning sun. Outside, the ranch hands waited with fresh horses. Crow swung into his saddle first. "You still have a war to finish," he said. Gabriel nodded once. "We do." They rode hard for the ranch. Dust trailed behind them like smoke from a dying fire. Bitter Hollow stared after them, silent and stunned. In the distance, the jagged line of dry Creek Canyon beckoned. The Rains gang was waiting. So was judgment. The wind carved bitter paths through the canyon walls as dawn bled cold light across the desolation of Dry Creek. The horses snorted uneasily. The men checked rifles, adjusted belts, cinched saddles tighter than nerves. Gabriel sat astride his stallion, face carved from stone, eyes cold and distant. Eliza rode beside him, her hands flexed around the worn grip of her revolver. No words passed between them. None were needed. Crow waited on the ridge above, silent as death, scanning the valley floor where the Rains gang lay sprawled like jackals fattened on the misery they had sown. Campfires flickered low. Shadowed figures slept or drank in lazy confidence. Gabriel raised his hand. Crow's silhouette vanished into the rocks. The others tightened formation. Time hung heavy, breath held by the land itself. Then a sharp cry split the stillness. A sentry fell backward into the dirt with Crow's blade buried deep. Chaos erupted. The ranch riders thundered down the slope, hooves tearing loose stone. Gabriel rode at the front, coat streaming like the wings of a dark angel. Eliza kept pace, eyes hard, teeth clenched. The first outlaw scrambled up, pistol half drawn. Gabriel's shot dropped him where he stood. Another tried to mount his horse. Eliza fired once, twice, the second round finding its mark. The camp exploded into screams and gunfire. Gabriel fought with ruthless precision, every shot a judgment. Eliza moved through the smoke and bodies with steady aim and iron nerves. Crow emerged and vanished at will, his knife flashing like lightning in the storm. They carved through the gang like the scythe through wheat. Amos Rains appeared last, riding straight for Gabriel, mouth twisted in a snarl of hate. The two men crashed together in a violent blur of fists, boots, and gunmetal. Eliza dismounted and sprinted toward them, ducking stray bullets, slipping through chaos. Her lungs burned. Her legs screamed. Gabriel drove his elbow into Rain's jaw. The outlaw staggered back but swung wildly with the butt of his revolver, catching Gabriel across the temple. Blood spilled freely down Gabriel's face. Rains raised his pistol, sneering. "I told you I'd take everything." The crack of a gun split the moment. Rains stumbled, eyes wide in disbelief, clutching at the crimson bloom spreading across his chest. He sank to his knees. Eliza stood behind him, smoking pistol in hand, arm shaking but steady. Rains coughed, face twisting into a cruel smile even as life ebbed away. "You ain't saved nothing. You're just like him. Just another killer." The last breath rattled from his throat. He fell forward into the dust, never to rise again. The fight was over. The few surviving outlaws threw down their weapons and fled into the broken landscape, leaving behind the dead and dying. The sun climbed higher, burning the mist away, revealing the carnage. The ranch riders began gathering the wounded, checking the fallen, clearing the field with silent efficiency. Gabriel wiped the blood from his face and approached Eliza. She stood motionless, staring at the body of the man she had killed. He reached out and gently lowered her arm. "You saved me. I had to." Their voices were low, as if the dead still listened. Crow walked past them, wiping his knife on his coat, nodding once in grim approval before mounting up and riding away without a word. The wind carried him back into the wilderness where he belonged. Bitter Hollow watched the returning riders like ghosts from behind shuttered windows. Gabriel dismounted and walked into the land office. Minutes later he emerged, papers in hand. He strode to Eliza and pressed the folded document into her calloused fingers, her brows furrowed. "What's this?" "Half the ranch, half of everything." Her mouth parted slightly. "Why?" Gabriel held her gaze. "You were never bought. You were never owed. You were the one thing I never deserved, but always needed." The street fell silent around them. For the first time since her arrival, the townsfolk stepped aside, no longer out of hatred or suspicion, but out of respect. Eliza stared down at the deed, then back at the man before her. She nodded once, slow and certain. "I'll build it with you," she said. The two walked side by side toward their horses. Bitter Hollow's worn sign creaked softly in the breeze overhead, weathered and scarred but still standing. They rode out together into the open land under a hard blue sky. The road ahead long and unforgiving, but theirs alone to walk. Behind them, the town slowly stirred from its long nightmare. Ahead lay work, sweat, dust and struggle, and justice made real, carved from blood and iron, carried forward by two souls who had survived hell and found purpose not in what was taken, but in what they claimed for themselves. The wind rose again, scattering the dust into the vastness of the frontier.